Viewers, amidst the massive storm over UK's grooming gang scandal, British MP Rupert Lowe has demanded a freeze on foreign aid to Pakistan. Speaking on the floor of the House, Lowe, who's a member of the UK Reform Party, has asserted that all of foreign aid to Pakistan should be stopped until it accepts and imprisons perpetrators of the ghastly child rape crimes in UK. Remember, most of the perpetrators convicted in mass child rapes are of Pakistani origin. The UK MP's call was subsequently supported by US billionaire Elon Musk. Musk reacted to Lowe's social media post and wrote, "Absolutely."
Will the government commit to urgently deporting all guilty foreign nationals involved, including family members who were aware of the crimes and therefore complicit? Will the government commit to stripping citizenship from dual nationals implicated and deport them as well? Race or religion must protect nobody. Will the government commit to pausing all Pakistani visas and foreign aid into the country until the Pakistani government agrees to accept any of its deported citizens that have perpetrated these crimes on British soil?
Meanwhile, UK PM Starmer has sparked controversy on Monday by using the term Asian in reference to child sexual abuse scandal which involved gangs of men largely of Pakistani heritage. Many people have objected to the generic term Asian in this context. Priyanka Chaturvedi, a leader of the Uddhav Thackeray-led Shiv Sena, has shared a post on X stating that these individuals involved should not be called Asian, but rather Pakistani grooming gangs. Elon Musk reacted to her post, writing true in response.
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 2 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
All right, and joining us now, Ben Habib, a former deputy leader of the Reform Party UK and former member of the EU Parliament. With us also is Bob Blackman, MP of the United Kingdom. Let me start with you first, Bob Blackman. The proposal that's introduced by the opposition as an amendment to the Child's Wellbeing and Schools Bill to launch a new national inquiry into this grooming gang scandal has been defeated in the House of Commons. Do you think that this proposal was very important, considering the government has reportedly already got a new framework in the works?
What we were asking for yesterday was a full national inquiry with witnesses being called and summoned to give evidence under oath. Particularly, it's not just the perpetrators, it's not just hearing from the victims, but we have the greatest of sympathy with the victims of this disgraceful activity, but also with the people that covered this up. And those people could be, I'm afraid, members of local authorities. They could be councillors, elected councillors. They could be council officials. There has been suggestions that there's been police collusion, or at least an overlooking of particular aspects of this scandal. And we do know this has been going on for a very long time indeed. This first emerged in a serious way in 2011, but that covered the period from 1997 to 2010. That first inquiry was in Rochdale, where people were imprisoned for their rape culture. But then it's been in a number of towns and cities across the United Kingdom. The problem is that we've always looked at this as being a local aspect. This needs to be a national inquiry. The other aspect that I think is terribly important is that frequently major politicians, including our Prime Minister, refer to the perpetrators of being of men of South Asian origin. I think we've got to be very clear. I have to say, give her credit, the Home Secretary was very clear on this on Monday. These are predominantly Pakistani Muslim origin men who are perpetrators of these evil crimes against young women.
All right, let me take the question across to Ben, because Ben, Elon Musk has supported the narrative that there aren't Asian grooming gangs as being referred to, but Pakistani grooming gangs. Do you think that this raises important questions about the need for very, very precise terminology and accountability to prevent unwarranted stereotyping of diverse communities, for instance, Indians, Sri Lankans, Bangladeshis, who could be put in the same category?
What we're grappling with is in the case of these gang rape gangs, is identifying specifically who it was and what gave rise to it, and why it was that they weren't brought to justice. And because we've got this kind of broken ethnicity in our country, sadly, we do have to identify the ethnicities so we can get to grips with the problem. Now, there was a good report done a few years ago by an organization called Quilliam that did identify that 85% of gang rape gangs in the UK are of British citizens of Asian background, mostly Pakistanis. That was what the report identified. And it is a testimony to our broken society that we have to go about identifying people in that way. But there's no alternative. When you want to get to the root of the problem, you have to be robust in questioning how the problem arose. And in this case, you have to identify the ethnicities of those who've been committing this crime.
Yeah, Bob, that's a very important question. Do you think it's important to identify the perpetrators for who they really are, and so that it does not implicate diverse Asian communities?
It is very important to distinguish that. I think people, we've made clear that the vast majority of British Pakistanis are law-abiding people who contribute to our economy. In similar ways, obviously, people of Indian origin, Bangladeshi origin, and Sri Lankan origin. However, there has been, the vast majority of those people that have been arrested and tried through the courts and convicted and now serving time in prison have been of either Pakistani origin or Somalian origin. And we need to call this out, because it's not just a case of evil perpetrators conducting these terrible crimes against innocent young girls in our communities, but it's also a fact of, it's a fundamental issue that people refer to this as being part of their culture and their cultural aspects. We've been very clear on this, and that is that if that is their culture, it doesn't belong in Britain, and it doesn't belong in any civilized area of the world. So the reality is that those perpetrators who are foreign nationals who commit these crimes should be deported. And in fact, we've got cases indeed where people are foreign nationals who've served time in prison, deportation orders have been issued against them, but still they're in the UK 10 years after the deportation orders have been issued. So we need to call these out, and it's absolutely wrong to tar everyone with the same brush.
Right. And in fact, Ben Habib, we've seen the opposition MP Rupert Lowe, who strongly criticized the UK government for continuing financial aid to Pakistan. He's highlighted concerns over these grooming gangs, predominantly having individuals of Pakistan origin, and he's also accused the Labour Party of neglecting addressing the issues that concerns prisoners of Pakistani descent. Do you agree with his position that they should be deported at the earliest?
So there is already an arrangement in place between Pakistan and the United Kingdom for the deportation of Pakistani nationals who've committed crimes in the United Kingdom back to Pakistan. There's already an agreement for that. The Labour Party seems not to be using it. Rupert Lowe is a good friend of mine. We've worked very closely together over many years. And what he says is absolutely right, of course, that Pakistan should take back those people in British society who hold dual Pakistani nationality and have committed these crimes. They should go back to Pakistan. And I would welcome that. And I think even Pakistan would welcome it if the Labour Party would ask for Pakistan to take them back. Because I'm sure, as you know, and I know this is the case in India as much as it is in Pakistan, paedophiles are abhorred. They are loathed. Pakistan would treat these paedophiles in a correctly draconian manner, and I'm sure you would in India. Frankly, left to our judicial system, they get much more lenient treatment. I would like to see all these go back to the countries where they will get the appropriate treatment that they deserve after the atrocities that they've committed. Multiple atrocities.
Yes.
Have you read any of the excerpts of any of the court cases and what these people did to these young girls, can I ask?
Right. And, let me put that question, in fact, across to Bob. Bob, what would you say about these demands of Rupert Lowe about stopping foreign aid to Pakistan unless they are accepted and imprisoned and are deported to Pakistan?
Well, I think what we've got to do, what we've got to do at the moment is make sure that those people that are convicted through the British courts, who are foreign nationals, who commit these evil crimes, are deported, irrespective of which country they originate from. As I've said, and others have said, these are predominantly Pakistani origin individuals. However, there are complications because obviously there are people that are British citizens that have committed these offences, and obviously from their perspective, it's very difficult then, even if one wanted to deport those individuals. So I think we've got to be cautious about that approach. That is why I think we've got to look at the deep-rooted cultural issues that come and stem from this. Because without doing that, I'm afraid, and this is one of the problems about the inquiries that have been held, no one's ever really looked at the fact of the people claiming it's part of their culture and their cultural identity that leads them to regard this as being acceptable. I mean, it's quite clearly unacceptable behaviour. It's criminal behaviour. And it's got to be called out.
Yeah, but Ben Habib, there are critics who argue that the focus on grooming gangs, and we're talking about specific communities. There is fueling of Islamophobia is one argument that comes in. But can we overlook the fact that most of this crime has specifically been Pakistani heritage men? Because in a 2012 judgment of the Liverpool Crown Court, the judge has remarked, addressing the convicted, that one of the factors he believed that these young girls were targeted was that they were not of your community or religion. How valid is this argument then?
So when we talk about racism in the United Kingdom, we tend to think of white racism against people of color, black people, people from South Asia, and so on. But of course, again, as I'm sure you know, and I know from my childhood in Pakistan, there's no shortage of racism in India or Pakistan. Both countries have a massive amount of racism. I remember as a child, if you were of darker skin in Pakistan, people could be prejudiced against you. And I'm sure it's the case in India. And indeed, if you were white in Pakistan, and again, I imagine there are Indians in India who are prejudiced against white people. And I think these elements that we've taken in from South Asia are racist against white people, and they predominantly preyed on these young white British girls, underage white British girls.
Right, and Bob, Mrs. Starmer has labelled what Elon Musk said ever since he started raising the issue of grooming gangs as lies and misinformation, which are apparently amplifying, quote unquote, the poison of the far right. How would you respond to these charges of the UK PM?
Well, I mean, Elon Musk has got his own opinions. I mean, I think what we as British politicians have to do is make sure we put our house in order in respect of this scandal. To suggest that this has suddenly started is, of course, false. This has been going on for many, many years, and there are many institutions in the United Kingdom that have been involved in this. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to often, where people are looking at the wholesale issue as opposed to specific areas here, where, for example, our institutions in our churches have been guilty of allowing child sex abuse, but where we are looking specifically, and this is the reason why it arose as a scandal over the Christmas period, is because of the situation in Oldham, where the Oldham Council were asking for this national inquiry, and the Labour government have turned them down. We know that actually it's not just having a local inquiry that matters now. It is actually a national inquiry into all that has gone on and all the collusion that has taken place and the covering up that has taken place. And the reason why I say this is very clear. We've got to get to the root of the problem before we can actually remove it as a problem from our society. Otherwise, it just continues on. And what we're seeing is perpetrators who've been obviously arrested and gone through our courts, then released back into the community, and it appears that they may be carrying on the self-same activities for which they were imprisoned in the first place. Right. That cannot be acceptable. And equally, it's seen by the community then as, yes, you can carry on without penalty.
All right. And Ben, the question to you then, in similar vein, while, of course, Keir Starmer dismisses, these claims of Elon Musk on grooming gangs, etc., such as lies and information, and says that such aspects amplify the poison of the far right, so on and so forth. But given the gravity of these grooming gang cases, the social impact, many are also talking about Mr. Starmer's own role, where he has served in the Crown Prosecution Services in his previous role. How do you look at that aspect?
I think the Prime Minister is a man who doesn't understand his job. He doesn't understand who it is to whom he owes his obligations. He owes his obligations to the British people. There can be no greater obligation than the protection of our children. And that it should take Elon Musk, an American citizen, to bring this issue to the fore in British public is a stain on our parliamentary system. And the fact that the Prime Minister should react to it and claim that it's far-right elements in our society that are jumping on this bandwagon, when actually every single civilized individual in the United Kingdom is concerned about it, actually testifies to what an awful man Keir Starmer is. And I have repeatedly, for many months now, called him anti-British. He is an anti-British Prime Minister. He has no legitimacy to be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
All right, but Ben Habib, there's also the criticism coming in from the Liberal Party side that the Conservative Party didn't ensure justice for these young victims during their regime. Do you think that's a valid criticism?
I agree with it. It's absolutely true. And the Conservative Party is as guilty of the fear of being accused of racism and therefore failing to do its job as the Labour Party. Absolutely. And the other thing that I have to say, and I'm sure everyone in India and Pakistan would agree with me, is that no country can tolerate the rapid rate of immigration that we've had. Our population is about 68 million. 10 million people have come to the United Kingdom in the last 25 years. That is a massive rate of change in the underlying makeup of our population. It's a rate of change that is unsustainable. And when you marry that rate of change in culture and ethnicity and demography in the country with a regulatory and legislative framework which gives protected status to ethnic minorities, which is what we have in this country, we actually have regulations that require us to progressively discriminate in favor of ethnic minorities. You create a perfect environment for the kind of criminality that you and I are now discussing.
All right, Ben Habib, Bob Blackman, I'd like to thank both of you for joining us this evening on Times Now.